Here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disrupt Search Mastermind session. It's an absolute pleasure that you're joining us, and I hope you are as thrilled as I am to kick this off now. I remember almost 1 year ago, in August 2019, we held the world's first virtual summit to gather tech experts like you, innovators and entrepreneurs, and to discuss what it would take to disrupt the giants of online search. And this event back then has brought together an amazing community of what I call disruptors, people who love to think big and people who can envision great ideas and great innovations, but also people who have enormous skill and experience and the willingness to put the hard work in that is required to change the world and make things better. So now it's my absolute pleasure tonight or this morning, wherever you are, wherever you're joining from, to unify this group and community once again and welcome some familiar faces, some old friends, and of course also new attendees. And the world has obviously changed, but I believe change is good, change is our nature. It is even the nature of the whole universe, and we are in the middle of it, ready to jump into, fly through, or launch into space with our fantastic expert panel. And we have an hour of time and a gigantic amount of questions, thrilling subjects to discuss, questions to address, and solutions to evolve. It's my great pleasure to launch this show now. And let's have a little introduction. Just one thing that I want to mention, that I'm very thankful for everyone that helped me, that helped us realizing this. That's Cindy and Adrian mainly. So let's get this started. How are you guys doing?
Very well, Leon.
It's
thank
too
you
hot
for
here.
the invitation.
Awesome. All right, let's start with Mihael. What are you disrupting at the moment? And the second question for the intro: would you install the Corona app? One possible Corona app.
So, as already said, I'm very much focused in the topic of personal data economy and privacy. So, as a co-founder of a startup that is developing solutions in this field, and during the last few years, I had a chance to talk to many different people and to exchange ideas about this very important topic. And I think we can go later on through the different questions that we thought of. And I think, so I'm expecting that we will have an interesting and fruitful discussion.
So Corona app, yes, no for you?
I would like to be surprised about the opinions of others, because the topic is very interesting in terms of privacy. But
yeah,
we'll
get into it in detail. We'll get into it in detail. That was just a warm up, a quick one. But so you are undecided, or you would consider it?
I would consider.
Okay, all right. Let's move on.
I would need to know the details. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to Fernando next up. Fernando, what are you disrupting at the moment, and would you install a Corona app? You're muted. You might have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just muted myself in order for not be any background noise or anything. So your first question is, what am I disrupting at the moment? So at the moment, I mean, you know very well, I'm working with you on Moonzebra. We have a Bitcoin ATM business. We're expanding our operation and also looking to build software solutions as well for other operators. So that is one thing. Another thing, I also have Auditus as well, which is a software project. It's a compliance management solution for igaming. Compliance is one of the biggest problems for the iGaming industry. and seems like I found a way to make it a lot easier and cheaper for companies to manage their compliance, and that is what I've been working on for the last 1 year and a half. And on top of that, I have my InfoSec duties as well. The moment I'm doing work for an iGaming operator as part of their information security department, and yeah, I mean it's good fun, I guess.
Okay, would you go ahead, download and install a Corona tracking app on your phone?
Well, I don't really see the need of it. Like you can look up all the data related to COVID-19 like online, and that's just, in my opinion, that's just the way for people to get installs. They take advantage of the trend, like it became like a mainstream thing, and yeah, like they just want installs, you know. And if you get a lot of installs, I think that you even get paid by like Google Play or something, you know. So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So, Paul, what are you disrupting at the moment? And would you install a Corona app?
Yeah, so beginning this past year, 2020, I'm at a new startup called Cognitive Space, and we're basically making AI-powered software to manage satellites and different space systems. And I'm a systems architect there. As for the Corona app tracking, no, I don't think I would install it. I'm concerned with the amount of data we're giving to big companies like Apple and Google, but then also for that much intrusion of privacy, it better be something really good, and I don't know if Corona is that important for that level of information.
Okay, yeah, interesting. So I think we can maybe continue on that discussion a little bit. Mihael, at the last conference, you had a presentation on a new vision for personal data and data privacy, and you also put it in context with personal liberty, basically. What do you see at the moment in that industry or sphere? Do you see positive or negative trends and tendencies? I'd like to hear a little bit from you.
Well, I'm following this space, and I would say that it's still not getting better. Actually, it's getting worse. So all the big companies are still collecting more and more data about us, and the technology that is being developed and is being used, it's more and more powerful. It's going at a exorbitant pace, and with all this development in AI, it's possible to create really detailed profiles about us, and just some recent let's say examples that I can give you is, one of them is the Clearview AI. I don't know if you heard about it. So this is a company that it's collecting all the photos that picture are publishing online on different platforms, and based on these photos, they are profiling them, and they created very detailed profiles about many so billions of people or that are using these platforms. And the thing that they are offering is that you can search this database just by the image of your face. So you get the person on the street, let's say, or in a shop, wherever. You take the picture, you put it in the database, and you get a detailed profile of this person. So you have a lot of governments and that are already using this. I think they have more than 2,000 users like that. So especially governmental agencies. But I think in the future there will also expand and offer these services to commercial organizations. And then you can imagine that this can have different implications for us in the future. So imagine, I don't know, let's say you are on a demonstration protesting for better privacy rights, and they have you get filmed, and the company search and find you in this database, and your profile is saying that you are let's say a person who is aware about your rights, and you don't get a job, example. So so this is one of the examples that is screaming how
I would like to
everything.
I would like to hand over to Fernando, and from I think the overarching topic is, we're entering ever more digitalized world. So Fernando, you as an expert in the field of information security, have you also noticed changes or trends? Now also especially with the Corona crisis, where there's a push, right? A push towards digitalization, everyone is going online. Are there additional risks for businesses, but also individuals? Share some of your insights, please.
Absolutely. I think the biggest new threat vector that I've seen is that cyber criminals take advantage of the global panic of the pandemic to pull off bigger social engineering attacks. So, like for example, phishing. There is plenty of cases of phishing emails that come from government health organizations with malicious links, and all COVID-19 related. Also, the way that malware has been spreading, like how it has evolved lately. You mentioned COVID-19 tracking apps, so that apparently lately has been a huge vector for malware and ransomware spreading. On top of that, I think something worth mentioning is that so as employment switched to remote, there is a big issue with employees not separating their personal digital identities and their work identities. So we see employees, for example, using the same device for their jobs and for their personal lives. And so that can create issue because data is not segregated properly. So let's say if the device gets compromised, both personal data and job-related data will be compromised as well. So I think that's the biggest risks that I've been noticing lately.
Interesting. Okay, let's go into space with Paul. And for those who have been following the Disrupt Search with Paul's face, he has had a talk at the last summit on basically small teams and what kind of advantage they have. And now, Paul, you have worked hard and advanced some things. Give us a little bit of an introduction, maybe what new venture you have what you're currently involved in. It's quite an interesting thing I researched.
So as I mentioned, we're building basically AI software to manage satellites, and it's definitely a growing industry. If you think of, let's take for example Elon Musk, he's sending up loads and loads of satellites for Starlink, and so he's kind of I almost see him as pushing the industry. There's more and more providers following that. So before, you might have a government with a dozen satellites or 24 satellites. Now we're seeing individual commercial providers with 60 satellites, 100 satellites, and it becomes a lot harder problem. Typically, they're managed by engineers, and so we're building data centers in space now with all these devices, and so we need software that will manage that. I kind of consider us like part Uber and part AWS. So right now we're kind of more on the Uber side of figuring out, when you can utilize a certain satellite for a certain task. But then additionally, we need to maintain software on these satellites or track health. And satellites eventually fall out of the sky. When do you need to put up a new satellite? So we're working on software that kind of that helps with those, answer some of those questions.
What I would be interested in is your views. A satellite system can be used, I guess, for a surveillance tracking also, right? In connection with Corona of global coverage, right? But on the other hand, you could also do beautiful things like sending uncensorable Bitcoin transactions over the satellite, right? And
Yes.
back up the network on Earth. So I think that's always like, technology versus like the freedom part, and then also like the control and surveillance part, which is always like balancing each out, the positive side and the negative side. What is your view on that? Because I mean, ultimately, you have to decide for your business, right? Like, are you helping some regime to control their citizen, or are you enabling great technologies and great advancing humanity by doing so? And now I would also leave it open to the whole panel to ask cross-referencing and just leave it open to the discussion.
Yeah, so maybe I can tie this all together. So first of all, there are definitely commercial companies and governments using satellites to do corona tracking in terms of imagery, radio frequency, whatever kind of data they can kind of scoop up. So yes, that is happening. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't really know. But yeah. Now the good thing, I guess, is what you mentioned about maybe having a Bitcoin in space, is that we have several interests, several providers, several commercial companies, multiple countries sending stuff into space now. And so, yes, there's surveillance, but we have more and more interests that can do that surveillance. So there's competing interests. And, we'll see whether Starlink works out, and whether we will have kind of lower latency connections, and we can start running more and more things kind of in space without a governing country. So we'll see if that works out. But yeah, it's, I think, a positive thing to have more competitors, more countries, more companies competing to do these kinds of things.
Okay, let me just quickly introduce two new panelists, which is one, Adrian, who is a co-host also at Disrupt Search, and then newly joined Pavel, e-commerce entrepreneur and political activist from Germany. Pavel, I think you still have sound problems. Maybe you could mute yourself until that's sorted, or are you ready to say hello to us?
Hey guys, do you hear a bad sound coming from me? Or?
Yeah, perfectly well. Yes, we're live and recording. Pavel, give us a very quick 20 seconds intro about yourself.
I'm a Russian libertarian from Berlin, pushing anarchy, Bitcoin, and liberty. Yeah, that's it.
Amazing. Okay. So then, join in anytime when you have a question to the panel. Anyone, and possibly mute yourself if you're not speaking. So I'll leave it up now for the discussion if anyone wants to jump in here. Somebody has a question? Otherwise,
I guess I'm not so much of a a cryptocurrency person, so I guess what kind of things do you envision, and anyone can answer this, if we could get more internet assets in space, what kind of things would that open up for the cryptocurrency community?
Yeah, maybe I'd be best answering this. Unfortunately, we don't have Adam back on the panel. We will probably have a chance another time to discuss this in all detail. I think in general, from a Bitcoiner's perspective, it's just great to use satellites for ensuring that the network is up to date. It's great for very, very sensitive operations like mining or large exchanges. That they have the closest and most accurate connection to the blockchain, and then just simply as a backup, right? So if a country decides to block the protocol, censor the protocol, not let transactions through, which I think is already happening in China. Bitcoin is banned, and I can only assume that on a technical level they also trying all they can do to limit the technology, just like they block Skype, Facebook, and all these apps, or also like what you see right now, right? Like this the TikTok social media app that's been developed in China, which is now really criticized for being a data miner. That is now blocked in India, and so we can see already that it's easy for governments to block certain apps, whether it's ultimately successful or not. And that's where I see a satellite network for transactions very, very powerful to just keep it open and keep it free for everyone, make it really uncensorable. And I think it's really like Bitcoin is agnostic towards the transaction network, right? So you can even have smoke signals. And so I see that the internet itself is also it's anti-fragile, right? It was designed to survive a nuclear war, and so that's pretty interesting now how more anti-fragile it can become. When we have more satellite connections. And I mean, I'm not too much into it. Maybe you could also share a little bit more, Bailey, Paul, what kind of use cases do you see actually? I think you mentioned. I mean, your business, right, is mostly focusing on like B2B infrastructure and like making satellite fleets better controllable. It would be very interesting, I think, to the panel also to learn a bit more details, like how this actually works and what kind of use cases you see.
Yeah, so currently, we're focusing on more B2B stuff, because that's who's using it, and it's a growing trend. We have potential customers that have one satellite, so it's not much of a problem. But 2 or 3 years from now, they may have 60. When we get to that point, I could see it becoming more of like a AWS model where you could, rent services and, throw your Bitcoin miner up on a satellite, and kind of rent that out. And you wouldn't have to necessarily worry about launching your own satellite. So that's when it will probably become interesting, but that will hopefully be in the near future, within less than 5 years from now, because many of these companies are planning to send up more and more satellites, and then it's a gold rush right now. Some of the companies are failing, so I think it was OneWeb where they were sending up satellites, and I think it was the UK government actually bought those vehicles, so they're up there, but they'll still be utilized. I forget if they're using it for weather or what, but they'll be using that network. But yeah, it's a gold rush right now, so in the next 5 years we'll hopefully see it kind of open up to more than just big B2B companies transactions.
Paul, I have a question. So, under which legislation these satellites operate? How does it work?
Under which legislation, you said?
Yeah, from the legal point of view.
That's a very good question. Right now, that's kind of being worked out because these constellations and vehicles that are being sent up are from multiple countries, and multiple countries are competing. And it's actually pretty funny because like sometimes you can task a satellite to do certain things, but you can only task it when it's over a certain area. So depending on the country that you're in. So yeah, it's not just the US, it's Europe. China is not so much in the mix because I don't think they're letting other people test their satellites. But yes, it's many countries. So the legal requirements are very complex.
Oh, complex. Okay. I'm asking from the perspective that if you want to, let's say, you have cryptocurrency transactions via satellite, so just in order to avoid blocking them, let's say that's what we are going to probably see in China in soon. So if you have, but I don't know if you have legislation allowing you to do whatever you want with these transactions and these data transfers.
Yeah, you definitely, I guess, shouldn't do whatever you want. But if there was kind of one country, you know, like I guess in terms of banking, right, the Sweden of space maybe that plays neutral, or not the Sweden, the Switzerland of space. Maybe there'll be a country where you can launch stuff and not have to go through all the legal hoops. But in terms of blocking, you know, you only need that radio frequency to get through. So it's more of a, if you wanted to start blocking stuff, you'd have to block physical radio frequencies, which could be done, but you know, it'd be less through software and more of a, you have to be close.
Yeah, but I think,
you know,
if you I think you can stop it just by by legal measures.
Yeah, for sure.
Just prohibit specific data transfers, and the operator of the satellites has to comply. But what do you think? Let's say if you're following the vision of SpaceX, example given, so their vision is that the costs of launching satellites is going to be lower and lower in the next years, and so I'm playing with the idea. So do you think it will be possible in the next futures, maybe in 10, 15 years, to have a crowdfunded launch of a satellite?
You said a cloud farm that launches with a satellite?
No, you know, if a launch is going to cost, I don't know,
a crowdfunding for a satellite launch, like maybe even a Bitcoin crowdfunding.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's a key problem is price right now for sure. It's expensive, but with that said, you are able to do more and more with smaller devices. So a lot of times you don't have to pay for the whole launch, right? So you can pay for just your payload. And so I think we already have examples of crowdfunding for satellites. So I don't know how much if anyone heard of LoRa, which is long range, which is a protocol for sensors. And they've sent up a LoRa satellite in order to just do testing, and it's a little junky thing, but it's enough that it's gonna make it around the Earth a few times before it falls down. So I could definitely see crowdfunding for a small satellite, and that's probably doable right now. And that size will hopefully become cheaper and cheaper, and so we can have a bigger and bigger payload.
So what kind of volume are we talking right now? How many parties are involved, and how could one get involved as an investor?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to all of those, but like I said, for that LoRa satellite, it was a small satellite, so a lot of them, if you have kind of like a good scientific case, you can get some space, and I'm pretty sure they crowdfunded that, but I'm not for certain. But yeah, in terms of investment, there are so like we're part of an accelerator, TechStars, that are just looking at aerospace investments.
Yeah.
And I believe OneWeb was invested, privately invested also before they went and got bought up here. But so there are investors out there looking at the aerospace industry, and like I said, it's kind of for launching things. There's kind of a gold rush right now for that.
Okay. Interesting. So how does the whole disruptive meaning come into play regarding, for example, you talked about the startup you're working for. I would imagine not many people are working right now at the moment at this company. So we're talking about small teams, highly effective and disruptive. So could you tell us more about your experience, how those teams work, how one could put a team together to work in that specific field? What's the best practice cases you may have?
Sure. Yeah. So by definition, yeah, we're a startup, so we're pretty small. There's a handful of us right now. I think the more interesting part of this might be that all this data from these commercial providers will be available to small companies and small teams. So if you want a picture from a satellite, I forget the company, there's a website right now where you can go purchase that picture in the near future. So in terms of disruption, we're building the systems that will hopefully manage this, but in terms of disruption, this data is going to be becoming more and more available to more and more people. And these services are becoming more and more available to more and more people.
Paul, I have a question. So what is the audience of the product that your company sells? Like, what's the end client? Who is it?
Well, our current client is actually the U.S. government, but we're trying to expand the commercial interest too. So Elon Musk, if you want to buy us, we're out here. No. So a lot of these, like I said, there's a kind of a gold rush to launch stuff. So there's a lot of stuff going up and not too much effort to manage these things. So in the next couple of years, we're going to have a lot of devices. And so, yeah, that's the other part is our commercial clients hopefully will be people who actually own the launch vehicles and are trying to manage them.
So that's very interesting because Leon and I were just kind of joking, but not really, last week regarding where we want to go with all of this that we're working on with the Disruptive Summit and the part with the investors and having Elon or some kind of really high level people and investors for that technology and know-how involved at some point was actually kind of the goal for the whole idea of starting this. So we'll see. Maybe next year we'll talk different business ideas or scales.
I'm sure Fernando can probably talk to some of this since he deals with InfoSec. it's the same problem with servers. And right, you have, let's start a game that's online.
Yeah.
Now we have to manage a whole buttload of servers. And so we need people to do that, and the problems that come along with that.
Maybe also to Mihael the question, since you are also involved in the industry in general, matching investors, projects, and like the business development, right? What do you see? So if you talk with investors, perhaps, is there great interest, and how do they assess these type of technologies? And like now again, like I think it's quite fascinating to see that there's a lot of competition between the private sector and and government tenders. So I think it's everyone is kind of knows, of course, in the head of their brain, the head that I mean, getting a big government deal is of course is a good for business. But then there might be concerns, right? What will happen in the end with the data, right? And how this technology might be used in the end. So from an investor perspective, how would you go and advise someone to invest most profitable in this space? Do you have any insights there?
Well, I can speak for the space that I'm involved in, and in the area of personal data, you have, I would say, like 3 major areas where you have new and interesting developments. A new technology, and the first block is about the personal data economy. So it's about how to create value of data, how you can ensure that the individuals who are basically the owners of their personal data, how they can get properly compensated, and how they can see what's happening with their data. And so this is one space, and this is, I would say, it's still quite in an early stage. And I would say, so this is a little bit risky area to invest, but still it's an important one. Then the second block is about the regulatory compliance. So it's about how to develop systems and technology that is supporting you in providing the regulatory compliance. And this got really big with the introduction of GDPR recently. And there you had a lot of investments in for different technologies that were being developed in terms of different tasks, say consent management, or you have insurance for following the data through all the systems that you have in a company. So you had very large investments in that part, but I would say this is quite mature now. And then you have a third block, which is very interesting, and it's about how to provide, how to develop and design and develop systems that provide privacy by design. And here you have, here is about to develop these tools for ensuring privacy and, let's say, for encryption, anonymization, and so on. And I think this is the part where which is quite interesting at the moment. And because as the difference to the first block that I mentioned, here you can, here there's a lot of demand here. So, you know, the people are asking for more secure applications, and they are more and more concerned about the privacy, and you just need to have this kind of technology and tools in order to develop the solutions. And so I think this is the area where you can monetize your solutions the fastest.
Anyone wants to add here? So I have a question otherwise for Paul and Fernando, starting with Fernando first maybe, because you have both worlds, like you understand the corporate structure but also the startup side. What is the advantage of a small team, Fernando? And then maybe Paul, you can add also to that.
Well, the advantage of a small team is because usually in a small team, like an individual can partake on different roles, and just like communication with different stakeholders is a lot easier and is a lot more straightforward. So there is no like complex hierarchy or anything. It's just a lot more easier and a lot more fast-paced as well. So I think that is the advantage of a small team.
Yeah, so I agree all that, and I'll just kind of maybe add on to that is that from working on this project, I've noticed that so bigger companies are realizing this, governments are realizing the advantages of small teams, and so more and more of these projects are being dealt with in an agile, small team manner, even in these huge companies. And so you might have a huge company or a huge government, but they're treating these projects like a startup inside of the organization.
Like, for example, Paul, I'm pretty sure that you work quite closely with your CEO, right?
Yes.
In your organization. So this is not the type of chance that you will get in a large, like corporate setting. So you won't get a chance to work closely with the main like key stakeholders and decision makers.
Yeah, also in my experience regarding the strategies of big corporations, trying to be as agile, as innovative as smaller team size startups is that often those people who have worked for years, maybe decades in those big offices in large groups, doing the sheep's work, monkey's work, whatever you want to call it, and then suddenly they have to be in depth with each other, talk and communicate more intense and on a daily basis. In my experience, what people tell me when I work for corporations is that it stresses them out because they're not used to it. They don't get the proper management from above because they say, well, now you have more freedom, deal with it. But people, in my experience, don't really want that freedom oftentimes. So that can be an issue because people are more stressed and less productive oftentimes than in the larger teams or where they don't even think they are really important because then they can be more laid back, which can be better.
Yeah, there's definitely an argument for not changing or changing slowly, right? If it's not broke, don't fix it. So with a smaller team, you get flexibility, maybe speed of building things, but if you have a product that works and sells, why change it? And there's definitely different personalities will take to smaller or larger teams. So it's not that you always need a smaller team, but for startups, right, in general, you need something that's fast and flexible.
I think there is also the benefit of transparency. So, like for instance, if you mess up, everyone is going to know. If someone else messes up, like everyone else is going to know. So that's I think that's quite a an element.
Yeah. Responsibility and liability, huge key points. Yeah.
And the other
Okay,
thing too,
we are.
I was just going to say,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
too, some people too will change in their career from liking small teams and being more flexible to liking larger teams. So it's not a fixed trait.
Yeah.
Just from my understanding, what is a small team and what is a large team in your view? So, example given, I was working in different projects from three project members till 300 project members. But if you have a project of 300 people, then of course you have many teams working on the project, and you have also maybe a 2-level or 3-level hierarchy. So what exactly do you mean by a large or small team?
I think the research is, well, the Amazon phrase is a small team is something a team that you can feed with 2 pizzas.
So 4 people.
So 6 to 8.
Between
No,
1 and
that
5.
was nice. I like it.
Okay, guys,
Depends on
we're coming
which
to an
country
end.
you are in, right?
We're finishing off. We're heading towards moon landing here with this beautiful session. I thank you already so much for joining and providing your time to the viewers and sharing your deep insights. I think perhaps as a last wrap up of everyone, I would like to ask an overarching question again, which is, so I mean, you are all very entrepreneurial, right? You use your professional expertise to do projects that you believe in, that might turn to successful products and services. So I would like to ask you, now with this new world, with this new world order almost, how are you dealing with these? I mean, surely you're all in the digital space already, so that's probably you don't have a big change going on in your projects. But what do you expect to happen next? So do you think the world will go back to how it looked like before, or will there be a transition or an evolution of sorts towards even more digitalization? What type of, perhaps if you have an idea, you could also share like a very specific trend or a service that you that changes our lifestyle, disruptive technology perhaps. And then, I mean, the main question to me is like, so what do you do to prepare? How is your business positioned to navigate through these trying times? And again, like our viewers, I think that is what is interesting, right? Like, how are you dealing right now with it, and what can you share as best practices or as a tip in general? How do you keep optimistic for the future of the world, that we're not ending in a bad, but rather in a good scenario? I'd like to hear your views on that, everyone, as a last question, please. Maybe start with Paul.
Sure. So yeah, that was a lot there, but I guess in general, I kind of already self-quarantined years ago and have been living in the country. So not too much has changed for me day to day. But so I think there's gonna probably be some kind of hybrid of what we're seeing now, everyone at home, and I think there's still reasons to go into an office and meet people. We'll probably get back to that in the near future. But I guess what I would say, for me, a lot of us have kind of extra time at home, so it's the perfect time to learn something new, whether it be a new skill or try a new business venture. And because, I think stuff will go back to relatively normal eventually. And so it's time to prepare for that.
So
Maybe Fernando next.
Me? All right. So I think that historically there is no pandemic that lasted forever. I think that what's happening is that companies are finding out that the changes that they had towards digitalization actually work better than what they had before, and so they most likely will. These are going to be permanent changes. So when it comes to remote employment and so on, those type of things. But yeah, in general, I do miss the way business was done. So like, for example, when it comes to tech B2B, you have trade shows and so on. I do miss that part, to be honest. And I do feel that I do kind of feel that the alternative that companies, when it comes to marketing, you have, for example, you see companies like organizing webinars and so on. I do feel like it's not a complete alternative to the face-to-face relationship building at networking events, conference, and so on. This is just me personally, but I do believe that this will return back to normal. And as I said, like historically, like the pandemics last like 2-3 years, maybe max. Nowadays, with the technology that we have and so on, like I don't think that's going to be even the case. So
Okay, forward with Mihael.
Yeah. So I would also agree that this situation we have now, this pandemic, is going to stop at some point of time, and life is going to go back to normal mostly. But what we can see now is that the companies did a huge leap forward in terms of understanding that how this virtual cooperation and virtual teams can actually work. I remember then a year ago, it was so difficult sometimes to agree for remote working possibilities for the clients or whatever. And now this is all obvious and possible. And what this is going to have major implications in I think that I mean the companies is going to, they understand that they can source. For example, here they can source people worldwide and let them work remotely. And it's not just like, I would say, developers that was done mostly before, but also for other types of work. And so this is going to be really interesting because you have then arbitrage opportunities. You can, let's say, live in a country with less expenses and work for a company that pays very well in another country, you know. So this is going to be an interesting development. But in general, from the point of view of personal data, something's going to happen because there's a projection that by 2025 we're going to collect like 400 billion gigabytes per day of data from all these different devices, not just from the computers, but also from drones, autonomous cars, 5G wearables, and so on. And if you're going to let that only few companies control all this information about us, I mean, this is going to be a world that I don't want to live with. There, yeah, it's going to be really dangerous. So I don't know. Maybe in a few years we have to figure out how to handle this.
Okay, then we have Pavel and Adrian next.
Yeah. So first of all, sorry that I'm late. I feel like I missed a big part of the discussion there, so I'm gonna rewatch that. But a lot of important points were already brought up, and I think the last one is one of the key conflicts that is going to happen, or that we see developing, in my opinion, is that really the centralization of data is either going to lead to a nationalization of those companies that have so much control over data, or that we really find a mechanism to privatize data in a way where every citizen has control of the data he provides and is rewarded in some sort. And first project that comes to mind is of course Brave browser, where you already get paid for the attention that you spend, and you can also pay content creators for the project for their projects. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch the development. That's the big hope of the crypto space, or the main point why I'm interested in it, is to find those solutions in there. And I think we're already on a good way, because we have alternatives to YouTube. We have things like BitChute. We have other companies and a lot of startups working on ideas like these. So it's gonna be interesting how, specifically how it's gonna be worked out within the law itself in the future. So how either international agreements or, I don't know, specific rights are going to be worked out, because we see the conflict in Bitcoin. A lot of countries try to ban it. A lot of different ones have it legalized in some way. And yeah, I think the same things are going to come for alternative technological solutions for social media too.
Good point.
Okay, Adrian, last one.
Yeah. All right. Regarding privacy, security, and the data issues that we now have, I think everything has been said that is of relevance. So I just want to take a focus to another thing that is defining our everyday lives at the moment, and for me, or for many people, as Paul mentioned earlier, is the way we work, where we work, and what's considered good work value, and how we can change that. Because in the architectural world, regarding the design of offices and stuff, if you just leave the walls out and slam a coffee shop downstairs, it doesn't make a good office. But that's happening all over the planet since a decade or so. I think this pandemic gave us the opportunity, if you work in design, if you work in architecture, or if you have a say in where people can work, how can we use spaces in multiple ways, multiple functions, and how can I set up my office anywhere? Because if we look now, well, cameras are turned off mainly, but if we look where we're sitting right now, we're all in completely different settings, from the home gym to the kind of nerdy office that Paul has, which I really like, and I'm sitting in bed because I'm sick. So that's great, and we are doing good work. We are productive. We're doing interesting stuff. We are living in different time zones and countries, and still, I think we do in this a little bit over an hour, we discussed and worked on much more important things and on a deeper basis than regular office workers do every single fucking day all over the planet. So that's my takeaway from the pandemic regarding our daily lives, that we should reconsider what, where, and how to work, and what's considered good work and productivity. So yeah, there are good opportunities for us out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's time to greet your parents. You have been live on TV for the past hour, and I enjoyed a lot. Thank you to all panelists for all your insights. For those who want to continue to talk, we can move the chat offline. The stream is going to finish now. Everyone that has been watching us, please be sure to sign up on disruptsearch.com. Join us. If you have questions, you can get directly in touch with our speakers. And yeah, keep up the good work, guys. Best of success to all your beautiful ventures. And I hope to see you soon again on another Mastermind session. Thanks a lot, and take good care.
All right. See you guys soon.
Ciao.
Bye, y'all.
Yeah.